My name is Bodhi Richards. I am a program manager for ShelterCare. My professional work centers around working with homeless people. I work with homeless families and medically fragile individuals. Professionally, I've also worked with people with mental disorders. I've been doing this work for about 14 years for this agency, and about 18 years overall so far. My motivation, so you understand, for telling my story is actually to give some context for the cause and to also support the organization and the work that I do. It's not really so much like I want to tell my story because I love sharing with people. In fact, I had never publicly told this story until fairly recently, when I became aware of how important it was for our clients to be able to share their stories, and also became aware through experience that most were either unwilling or unable to tell their stories. When I was 15 years old, my stepfather threw me through a sliding glass window. At one point he had broken a stick over my back, like a small baseball bat. This was not the first incident of abuse that I had experienced in my childhood. I frequently ate my meals alone in the garage, which was also my bedroom. I had suffered tremendous physical and sexual abuse from another of my mother's stepfathers. She had a string of husbands over the years. I had a lot of experiences in my childhood that I sort of assumed were normal, actually. So when I was 15, one of my stepfathers threw me through a sliding glass window, and I was just old enough and big enough that I realized I'd had enough. And I made what to me seemed like a very obvious and wise decision. I ran away from home. Nobody followed me. Nobody called the police. Nobody tried to bring me back. So this was in San Diego, California. I quickly made my way down to the beach and hung out with some friends who I knew who were also homeless. And for 3 years, I basically traveled with other teenagers around the San Diego area. We panhandled. If we could get a hold of cheap drugs, we'd sell them. I did a lot of shoplifting. When I didn't have enough money to buy cigarettes, alcohol, and food, I would shoplift those things. In a way, I'm fortunate that I don't have a criminal record, because I wasn't ever arrested for any of these incidents. From another perspective, though, you could say it was really unlucky, because I also didn't know that there were programs out there to help youth. I didn't trust any adults. I didn't trust the system. So without going too deeply into gritty details, I think that at least gives a picture that things were pretty ugly in my youth. The only way out that I could think of to get out of homelessness as a kid was to join the Army. So when I was 18, I went to the Army recruiter. I tried to sign up, and they wouldn't take me because I didn't have a high school diploma. I found another program, the California Conservation Corps. That's a program that is very similar to the Federal Job Corps, or also AmeriCorps is popular nowadays. And it basically teaches youth to hold a job, to pay bills, to responsibly care for themselves. So I joined the Conservation Corps. I was in the Conservation Corps for 1.5 years, and it really turned my life around, actually. I did trail work. I was in the forest. It got me out of the environment. I was completely pulled away from all my friends who had sort of become my impromptu street family. By pulling me out of the environment, it kind of pulled me out of all of those influences. It's really difficult when you're living surrounded by drugs, alcohol, and all the behaviors that go along with that. It's very difficult to really get yourself in any other direction and turn it around in any other direction. I managed to go through the Conservation Corps and worked my way through their program. Studies show that the longer that a person is homeless, the longer it takes for them to pull out. So basically, I was abused throughout my childhood. I was homeless for about 3 years till I was 18. And I kind of feel like my whole life, even up to this point, even to this day, I'm 43 now, has been a little bit stunted by that experience. I did not get the GED, the high school equivalency that would have let me join the Army when I was 18. I didn't get my GED until I was 25 years old. I did not earn more than minimum wage until I was just under 30. I didn't graduate from college until I was 40, and I just kind of feel like I've been behind. My professional career is finally kind of taking off because I got my college degree, but a lot of people get their college degree when they're in their early 20s, So I often think that I'm kind of 20 years behind everybody else. To bring it back to my roots, 2 of my friends that I ran with when I was a kid were murdered when they were young, when I was still young myself. One committed suicide. Of the people that I ran around with when I was homeless, I'm the only one that I know of who's still alive and out of prison. Imagine, though, what would have happened if we had gotten help when we were younger. If maybe we had lived in a society that didn't think it was acceptable to sort of ignore the painful things that we see on the streets. Because all of those young men and women could have been assisting, making a contribution to society. I'm making a significant contribution to society myself, and I kind of always think about those people who I've lost, who could have been doing something similar, And that's a sad sort of waste. The cost of ignoring the poverty and homelessness problem, it costs a lot in dollars. It also costs a lot in human lives and human contributions. One of my friends who wasn't homeless, but who was using and drinking a lot with me, is actually, I'm not going to name I'm not going to name his institution. I don't want to out him, but he's a professor at a university. He had more support, familial support, and wasn't living in poverty, but he did suffer drug and alcohol issues. And I met with him a couple years ago, and we were sitting in a cafe, and I kind of turned to him and I said, do you ever feel like you're kind of an imposter among all these people? You walk into a room full of suits and you're like, and he goes, Bodhi, I've got graduate school behind me. I've been teaching classes for years, and every day I still feel like I'm kind of faking it a little bit. And I kind of have this irrational fear of what's going to happen if they find out that I don't really know, that I'm really just this sort of, alcoholic kid hanging out with a bunch of homeless kids on the street, what's going to happen? Am I going to be found out? And I actually go through that myself all the time. Anytime I get tripped up with numbers, again, I'm not, my education is behind, I think, some folks. When I get tripped up by numbers, when I can't remember what a certain, county, state, whatever acronym means, that's when those old fears come up. And I'm like, gosh, I really want to help people, but what's going to happen if I'm found out? Somebody figures out that I'm really this poverty-stricken homeless kid, in an adult's body wearing a suit, If I want to project what needs to happen in our country, or at least in the state of Oregon, the homeless people have to actually stop being invisible to us. That's the first step. It's making it really clear how common the problem is, how big the problem is. If this story is ever heard by people who are driving around in their cars or something, or off in the, people who have maybe never experienced poverty, please think about where you'd use the bathroom if you had no access to it. You know what I mean? Please think about where you'd get food if you didn't have any food. Please think about where you would set up a tent if you were lucky enough to have one, and realize that the experience of people who are homeless, that it's all exactly normal, you know? Any laws that we put in place to prevent people from doing that are really just trying to slap the blinders back on